Now, in the past couple videos, I've mentioned something about like a Linux vulnerability and those types of things. Now, I kind of call those out because they're extremely rare. Linux is a very secure operating system, and by contrast, Windows is not. And I always say that, but that's because I know Windows. I know Windows very well. I've been working on it, securing it for 20 plus years. I mean, that's how long I've been on Windows, and it's a very difficult thing because it's a constantly moving target. Now, today, Windows had another one of the worst vulnerabilities in history released, at least in my opinion from a business point of view, especially for users that use Microsoft's Remote Desktop. Now, Remote Desktop on itself is a wonderful feature. I use it all the time. I love it, but Remote Desktop itself is extremely unsecure. Now, they've tried their best to do better about this, but there's 4 massive holes that were opened up today. And I say massive because these type of holes just have never happened on Linux or Mac or a lot of other operating systems. This right here is the epitome of how bad Windows is when it comes to a security aspect. And as a system admin, or if you're a security personnel out there that works in the IT industry, you definitely can back me up. This is a constant trouble, a constant issue with Windows. It is very hard to secure. But this new vulnerability, it's actually 4 different bugs or security releases that came out. They have been patched officially on the Microsoft's thing. So if you are using Remote Desktop, definitely run your security updates. Because without them, I could only imagine how this is going to affect you. It's very, very important you patch this, because this vulnerability is not just any old vulnerability that can be exploited. Because honestly, I could make a video every single day over about a Windows vulnerability that's come out. This one is wormable. What that means is it can execute code remotely without any user intervention or passwords or any of that. It can literally exploit your system through this vulnerability. So definitely patch your systems if you're using Remote Desktop services. If you can't patch your systems, disable Remote Desktop. That needs to be said. Like I said, this is a wormable thing, and why that's such a big deal is, one, a hacker could get in, execute code remotely. This can lead to all kinds of malware, viruses, and probably the worst, my absolute greatest fear when it comes to Windows-based systems is ransomware. Ransomware encrypts all your files. There's no way to get it back except restore from backups. So definitely be taking good backups anyways, but at the same time, you need to be aware this is a very serious thing. So don't be one of those guys that I never update Windows and things are just fine. If you use Remote Desktop, definitely update Windows or disable Remote Desktop altogether. Other notable things in the security release is Adobe Flash has more security bugs that aren't patched, which if you're using Adobe Flash, stop. I mean, who uses Flash anymore? But I thought I'd mention it here in case there's a one-off person that uses Adobe Flash through a web browser. Chrome by default disables this. I think IE and Edge both allow it, but definitely Adobe Flash is pretty much a lost cause at this point. Adobe, I think, has even stopped patching it. They're just like, who cares? They've given up. So please note, another bug came out about this, but honestly, last month's bug on Adobe Flash wasn't patched either. So just know it's extremely unsecure if you do use anything with Adobe Flash in it. And as far as the updating immediately, whenever it comes to Windows 10 updates, make sure you're keeping good backups. Don't rely on system restore. Too many times I see people say, oh, I had a system restore point, and then they go to restore it, and then it doesn't bring their system back to where it should be. Definitely use different software to back this up. I highly recommend a block-based backup system. I've used a variety of these in business, whether it's Symantec Backup Exec, which I don't recommend anymore. There's Backup Assistant. There's all kinds. Just use whatever you have, but don't rely on the built-in backup from Windows because this is rather bad. The actual full server backup is okay, but don't rely on system restore, as I've had a lot of issues with it, and I think pretty much everyone has, and goes without saying. But this video is really just a kind of a PSA, because a lot of times I'm always Linux, and I think the last couple times I've done Linux videos over vulnerabilities and things that have come out there, I don't want to make you think that Linux is like Windows. Linux is much more secure, and to kind of emphasize this point, I thought I'd go ahead and release this, because this is what we usually deal with on a weekly, if not monthly basis when these security releases happen. As a system admin, you look at them and go, okay, do I use these services? If I do, I need to make sure they're patched. If they're not patched, I need to make sure they're disabled. Because if you don't, and you fall far behind on your security, someone compromises your system, installs ransomware, you're probably going to lose your job and look like a fool doing it. And that is really what this is about. So be very careful with Windows-based systems, and if any of the remote desktop users out there, I know I'm one of them. So I will be doing a patch this weekend on all my servers at work and workstations alike, just to make sure all those holes are plugged. But if you're not going to do that, again, disable the service. And if you're a home user and you're using Windows and you'd like to try out Linux, definitely check out my series over Windows to Linux and making that switch. If you care about your security and privacy, I think it's a no-brainer. You have to pretty much switch to Linux. It's whether or not you can or not. Some people have issues with Adobe and Microsoft. But for this video, I just kind of wanted to make this just to say, watch out for this big bug, because it is out in the wild now and people are going to exploit it, and we're going to be seeing more ransomware on the market. Hopefully nothing like we saw in 2017 when like the NSA tools got leaked on the net and you saw a whole swath of ransomware worms get released over the next 3 to 6 months. It was just a whole bunch of variants of ransomware, and so many people got affected, and some people are still getting infected with those types of things because they just won't patch their system. So definitely watch out for these, and definitely watch out for remote desktop. But with all that said, let me know your thoughts down in the comments section below. A big shout out to all my patrons. Without you, I couldn't make videos like this one, and I'll see you in the next one.